Today's podcast is sponsored by Kevin Feely Athletic Therapy, helping you in all matters related to pain, injury, and athletic performance. Bookings can be made through the website at www.kevinfeelyathletictherapy.ie. Thanks to Kevin for sponsoring the podcast, and I will leave the links to the website and social media accounts in the video description. So Ciaran, thanks very much for coming on. How have you been managing the last 2 or 3 months in sort of the lockdown?
Yeah, strange times there. I suppose it's my first summer probably ever without having some involvement in GA. From going straight from playing to working on the Sunday game. 10 years ago, I've been involved right throughout. So it's strange. Even my kids, the kids team, juvenile team I looked after. Summer months are used to getting out in the good weather after being out in all the bad weather and all the storms. So it's definitely different times. But I suppose in some ways you have to take the positives out. In some ways it's a bit of a break. You get to reflect, and I've had time to play a bit of golf and take it easy and enjoy maybe the sunshine. So yeah, you do miss it. But listen, I suppose this morning's roadmap from the GA gives us all a little bit of hope and a little bit of pep in the step that we'll get club stuff back and even get the kids back on the field. At the end of the month, as much as the new normal will be different, and we're all going to have to upscale in terms of how we coach and how we go about it. But there's optimism there now, and there's hope that we might get a club season and we might get a county championship season, of course, if it's safe. But so listen, I think everyone has a little bit of a pep in their step this week now that there's a chance we'll get back to some sort of level of normality.
Yeah, would you agree with going with the club championship first before the inter-county one? I think John Hoare maybe said September, October for the inter-county. So would you agree with that move?
Yeah, listen, I think we've got to have a very open mind, and I think my view, the first important thing is get the kids back out in the field, get the GA clubs back open. I know we're none of us are health experts, but certainly there's probably little evidence that the kids have been, serious spreaders of COVID-19. And let's hope that that's correct. And let's hope we can I think it's important, particularly for the younger kids, teenagers, their mental health, get them back out in the GA fields. And we can certainly, even to get back training and keep that kind of element of social distance or whatever we have to do, I think it'd be brilliant. Club versus county. I think our objective should be to try and get a balance of both this year.
Yeah.
And try and get games going again in a safe environment. And if we can get a club championship in August, September, fantastic. And it will be a great lift to all the communities locally. And then I think come October, November, coming into the winter period, if we can utilise some of the stadiums they have in terms of lights and facilities, maybe that's a better platform to run the inter-county season. And if we get a straight knockout, like, it will be different, but it will be a great buzz. The downsides are you lose a match, you're out, and that applies to the club as well. And that's going to be hard to take. But you know what? In the current environment, I don't think we can be selfish. I think we can just be happy that we might get something in 2020. And I think there will be great excitement, hopefully, around it. And then we move forward to 2021, hoping that we're in a better place to get the full season back on board. So I think, there's a bit of positive energy out there, and let's look forward to and embrace it.
Yeah, even the straight knockout, you might even see a scenario with Dublin going to Killarney or Castlebarron around 1 or 2, and then suddenly one of the big guns is taken out, and it just opens the way for maybe even a smaller county.
Yeah, absolutely. It leaves everybody very, very vulnerable, and it's the old kind of tradition. It's the way it was. One slip up, you're gone. So it creates opportunities for the underdog, definitely, and someone to come from nowhere to get a run on the championship. And we've seen in the qualifiers over the last few years that any team can be beaten on any given day, and every team has the odd blip where they just don't perform. So I think it will be a wide open championship, and like there's challenges there for Dublin as well. The lockdown will certainly have broken that bit of momentum. Dublin probably the last 5 years had a set routine in their off season. They knew exactly what they were doing and what they were preparing, and they had a set layout throughout the league where they took 5 weeks off after the league to prepare for the championship. They probably didn't have to come into the Leinster Championship in peak condition because they knew they were going to be comfortable and okay. There was always that back door. So it really balances it out that, an open draw in October, Dublin could draw Mayo or Tyrone away or something, and it creates that buzz and that excitement, and it's the same for everybody. Everyone's had the same challenges, so I would be really look forward to. And listen, it's touch wood that we don't get the second wave. It's still probably a little bit up in the air, but definitely to have that prospect of a straight knockout over a 5-6 week festival of football would be brilliant.
Yeah, so we'll move on to your time playing with Dublin. You came in '96, and Dublin had just won the All Ireland in '95. So, what was it like coming into an All Ireland winning side?
Yeah, it was. Listen, it was very strange at the time, and I kind of I do remember it. Dublin were All Ireland champions. I was playing under 21. We were actually knocked out of the under 21 championship by Louth, and I hadn't played particularly well at all. And I got a phone call from Mickey Whelan inviting me into the senior squad, and I probably didn't back myself enough at the time that I was good enough. I probably didn't think I was at that level or at that standard. It kind of came as a bit of a shock at the time. Obviously, he saw something in me, but going into that dressing room for the first time was one of the most nerve-wracking experiences of my life. And first training session where you're afraid to drop a ball, or Keith Barr or Charlie Revin or someone would maybe have a hop off you or something. And so I was a nervous wreck. And you got through Tuesday night and you were thinking, great buzz, great to be part of. You were still kind of scratching yourself, and then you have to go back and do it again on a Thursday night and a Tuesday night. So the first few weeks were very, very nerve-wracking, but like everything, you settle in. There were some guys that were brilliant in that dressing room. Some guys like John McNally, who when he won in '83, I was 7 years of age, and you were pinching yourself thinking you were sitting beside him in the dressing room. So a great experience. And I think I went into the panel in April '96, and then I ended up starting in the Leinster final a few months later, which I could never have envisaged. But in some ways it was probably a good thing, because nobody knew who I was, and they actually thought I was Mickey Whelan's son, would you believe, because of the same surname. So yeah, it was a kind of a roller coaster of a year to finish the year. Meath bet us in the Leinster final. I was probably unlucky that I scored a goal in the last minute that was disallowed, and that would have been the dream start to beat Meath by a point in Leinster final. That would have been Carlsberg stuff. But still, to end that year, it was I kind of had to pinch myself that I was part of the Dublin setup then going forward, and it kicked on from there, I suppose.
Yeah, it would have been a disappointment of that team that, like previous Dublin teams, they didn't kick on maybe and just get that second All Ireland, and it might just kickstart it a bit more.
Yeah, listen, I suppose that team had been to the well a lot, in that they'd been through the debacle with Meath in '91. They lost the final to Donegal in '92. Derry had beaten them in '93. Down had beat them in the final in '94. They had a lot of miles on the clock, a lot of big games in them, and I think there was a sense of relief probably in '95 when they got over the line. That combined with a change of manager, and listen, we've seen it in all sports when a manager goes out at the top, the next guy that comes in, similar to Dessie Farrell this year, it's a very, very tough position to come into a dressing room of All Ireland winners and keep that same level of momentum and performance. And to be honest, I think most guys in that dressing room would probably reflect and think that there was a hangover from '95, no doubt, in '96. And a Meath team came out of nowhere that was very young team, very inexperienced team. It was a second coming under Sean Boyle, and nobody expected them to go on and achieve what they did that year. And Dublin were expected to beat them comfortably after beating them by 10 points in '95. And when Meath turned us over that day in the rain, that gave them the shot in the arm that they needed to go on. And that Meath team became a great Meath team in the late '90s then, and caused us and me heartache, definitely, for my first 5 years, 6 years in a Dublin jersey, because they had that confidence and they had that belief. They won '96, they won '99. They were very, very difficult to beat.
Yeah, you can compare to nowadays. Through the noughties, the Leinster Championship was probably very competitive. You had Kildare, Meath, Laois, Westmeath. It was harder to win, I suppose, back then when you were playing.
Yeah, it was. It was very difficult, and particularly even the late '90s, you had Kildare, who were very good under Miko at the time, Dwyer, and they were like, Miko was with them right till 2000, 2001. And then, we beat Kildare in 2002 to win a Leinster Championship. And they were hard won, and there was a capacity crowd at every game, whether it was the first round or all the way through, which is, when you look at today's, it's very different to today's Leinster Championship. And Miko came again with a Laois team in 2003, and they had been very, very good, successful at minor level in prior years, and he had a good group of players there. And they were very strong for a couple of years, and then Paddy came with a blast with Westmeath in 2004, with 1 year. So it was definitely the late 90s and the early 90s. The Leinster Championship was very, very competitive, and we managed to get a grip of it then in 2005, and got on a roll to win like six, maybe 5 in a row, maybe at that point. And it was still tough. It was still tough. We went cruising through them like, the team of today is. And they were a great experience, because it was a different time to be a Dublin footballer, I suppose. There hadn't been an All-Ireland since 95, so it was a very, very different place in Dublin in terms of the supporters and the drive. And, listen, there were great times. We came so close numerous times to maybe progress, and never got there, but still, I'd still do it all again.
Yeah, was the pressure maybe getting the better of that team from 2005 to 2009, that it had been the 10 years since Dublin had won the All-Ireland, and you'd been close in semi-finals and quarter-finals?
Yeah, we just didn't have that. We weren't strong enough mentally. We didn't have that belief, and we needed something to break for us. And we probably just struggled to take out a big team and get a big win during that period. And I think that's all it would have taken for us to turn the corner, similar to 2011 when Dublin won that All-Ireland. All of a sudden the status changed, the belief changed. You can foster and change a culture within a dressing room. And even going back to, I think it was 2010, even beat Tyrone in the quarterfinal. That was the start of kind of, that was a big game for Dublin to win. And we just hadn't achieved that in the previous years. And we had lost big games. And it became a bit of a mental kind of baggage for the team to get over the line. And not unlike probably the current Mayo team, over the last few years, it's the talent was certainly there. You look back and you believe and you say, yeah, we could have been good enough to get through that. We could have won an All-Ireland, but you know what? We didn't, and all we needed was something to break our way in that period, and it would have changed the mindset for us and allowed us to probably change that culture of the dressing room. But yeah, there was a lot of pressure there, I suppose, and expectation as well. But you can't look back and have any regrets. There were still great times and great games, and to play in front of a capacity crowd nearly every time you go into Croke Park was just an awesome experience.
Yeah, one of the great games you were involved in was the 2006 semi-final against Mayo, and I had Keith Higgins on a few weeks ago, and when they went down to the hill to warm up, he said it was the older lads that decided they go down and warm up. Now, you probably stayed in the tunnel a bit longer than you would have normally. What were you thinking when you saw Mayo, or you heard that they'd gone down?
Yeah, well, I suppose, I remember it happening in 1984. I was in the Cusack stand, and Tyrone went down that end, and I remember Dublin coming out and going down the same end, and the hill really rose to it, and it created a great buzz and excitement, and it was crazy really looking at two teams warming up down the one end, and it was Dublin making a statement of intent that the hill was their end. So that was a memory that was fresh in my mind, and right throughout my career nobody had done it, and you got to give. You can look back now and have a bit of a laugh about it. You've got to give the Mayo lads a bit of credit for trying to stir the pot, if you want to call it that. As much as it wasn't their management, I don't think it was the players probably that led it. But word filtered into the dressing room that they had gone down the end, and there was never any doubt what we were going to do. It didn't even come up for discussion. It was a case of, we're going down there, and that's the end of it. And I don't think there wasn't even one voice that said, listen, lads, maybe, go the far end. And I think if it happened in Jim Gavin's era, maybe the lads would have just strolled out casually, probably and went up to no big deal. But no, it was probably probably a different time in that I think that the preparations for games now are a lot more measured and calmer. And you know, back probably then, you were fairly wired up leaving the dressing room, and people were bursting to get out onto the field, and it was probably a slightly different approach. So we certainly weren't going to back down. It did it impact the game? I don't think it impacted the game at all, in that we were still 7 points up with 20 minutes to go. We had the game in our control, and we let it slip, and Mayo got momentum in the last quarter, and Ciaran McDonald kicked phenomenal scores. So I would never agree that it had bearing on the game, but it was good crack at the time. There was plenty of shoulders thrown around the place, and there was plenty of stuff going on that probably wasn't picked up on the camera. But you have to look back at these things and enjoy it for what it is, and have a bit of crack about it at this point.
Even looking back at it yourself, nearly, I think Keith Higgins was the Roman army, nearly sort of charging down to the hill. You were leading it yourself.
Yeah. I look back, I see it plenty of times, Dara, and yeah, I do have a little cringe. All right, yeah, you were wound up, and that was the nature of it. And it was our end as far as we were concerned, whether that's right or wrong. But we were certainly not gonna back down. And listen, we're probably in some ways probably lucky that it didn't become more serious. There was no, while there was plenty of pushing and shoving, it didn't spill over or get out of hand. Yeah, it's one of these things that the mill and the hill. You look back and you say, yeah, it was a bit of fun, I suppose.
Yeah, you then retired in 2009. Did you know that year that would be the end for you? That would be your last year?
Yeah, I did. Well, yeah, I did. I suppose, Darren, that I had played the league in 2009. Pat Gilroy had come in, and I was struggling a small bit in terms of, I knew I was struggling in training. I wasn't getting to the heights that I had done in previous years. I probably lost a little bit of pace as well, and I didn't get. It was the first year I was left out of the team for the championship, so I became a kind of an impact sub, and that's very difficult to, I suppose, to adapt to when you've started for the previous 13 years. So I came on the Leinster final against Kildare, done pretty well. I had hoped. I was actually, ironically, I was doing. Pat Gilroy was doing a lot of training with me at full forward, and that's where I was playing my training game. So I wasn't even sharp in terms of the midfield role. And while the training was going well at full forward, and I never backed myself to. I never thought that I could make a significant impact at that stage in my career on the edge of the square. It never really materialised. It was supposed to be kept up the sleeve for later, and when we got to Kerry beat us in the quarter final, but it was meant to be kind of utilised in that quarter final and the semi final. But that game didn't go as envisaged, and we were 11, 12 points down. So when I was brought into that game at that point, I was brought in the middle of the park in my old traditional role. So I knew I was on the kind of downturn, and I had a second child. My wife was about to have a second child. I knew it was going to be difficult. So I kind of made up my own mind. This was the kind of swan song. Now, that's not to say when I stepped out in 2010, I certainly found it difficult to adjust coming out of that bubble. It's very challenging. I think it's something that's not spoken a lot by former intercounty players when they've been part of something for so long. It's very, very tough to adjust to the new life. And I did speak to Pat Gilroy. Unfortunately, I picked up a nasty enough hamstring injury in the club game in March 2010. And I was trying to recover from that. And I did speak to Pat Gilroy at the beginning of 2011 about a potential return, but it would have been a return for a different role, and it would have been probably in the full forward line. But I couldn't get the injury right, and I'd done a bit of work with the physios in the background, and it wasn't coming good, and I was way behind at that stage, and it would have been a foolish move on my behalf to try and push it forward. So yeah, I could have been back, but in 2009 I knew I was pushing 34, and I knew in terms of playing midfield, it was becoming a difficult challenge to get up and down the field.
You were nearly unlucky in some ways that you came in '96 and they won the All Ireland in '95, and then says '09 and then they won it in '11. So, do you look back at any disappointment that you didn't win that All Ireland?
Yeah, of course you do. You always look back, and there isn't a day that goes by that I kind of say to myself, God, I wish you just had been there for one of them. And it's something that you hear regularly about missing the boat and being the in-betweener and not getting the All Ireland medal. But you know what? In the overall context of life and your health and everything that goes on, it's not a big deal. And I'm it's not something that I lie awake at night wondering about. Yes, it would have been great to be involved at either end on one of them, but your health is your wealth at the end of the day, and I still, those 13, 14 years that I was there, I'd do anything to do it all again.
Yes, we'll move on to sort of general GA. They brought in a couple of rule changes to the football championship, anyways, this year. The advanced mark. What will be your thoughts on that one, firstly?
Yeah, it kind of snuck in under the radar, and it kind of shocked a lot of people. Obviously, it was in the league last year, and teams didn't invest much time into it, and we probably haven't really got to see it in its true form. I definitely think it definitely changes the tactical approach, and it would have been and it will be, hopefully it will be very interesting later in the year, but it would have been very interesting to see when teams got out of the league and got into championship preparations in the good weather, and they got 6-7 weeks, and they really analysed the benefit that it could bring to a team. That if you had somebody that you could, like, it was quite easy to pick up a nice 20-25 mark in around that D area, and I think it definitely is going to bring. Well, I suppose, am I a fan of it? I'm not sure. I'm not sure. I'm not really. I think it could become a little bit of a plague on the game and slow the game down. But I definitely think we are going to see different changes to forward tactics, and particularly the movement of forwards to try and create that space to pick up easy marks in that scoring zone, and getting the right people on the ball to win those marks. Very similar, to basketball, really. I think we're going to see a lot of the movement up front. So I don't think we've seen the impact that it's going to have. I think it will have a huge impact, because you could be taking 4 or 5 points from marks in big games, and I don't think teams got enough time to work and invest time into it, and I think that will happen. So, but I think it takes away from the natural kind of one-on-one inside, getting the ball in quickly. It could slow down the game. So I'm kind of I wait to see how it evolves, but I'm more negative than I am positive about it, I suppose.
Yeah, would you even tweak it maybe that it's only inside the 21 even? That's a big long kick in, and the forward gets ahead of the defender and wins it, rather than the 20-meter little punt kick, and then a forward unmarked just catches it, and then that's a mark.
Yeah, like it's I know from playing international rules that it was one of the tactics that we would have used, that because you could go mark after mark, that you used to try and work 2 marks and get a short one into the chest, into that scoring zone, and then you had a free shot and goal. There's nothing really exciting about it. It's effective. So, yeah, you could look at something longer. I think what we were trying to reward was maybe, the long direct ball into the full forward line, or the full forward and stuff like that. That bringing that diagonal ball back in, and the strength of having a good full forward in there. But yeah, I'm just mixed about it, to be honest, and I see how it unfolds. I think we were in a very good position with the game. That the attacking philosophy was really beginning to come back into it. Teams were playing with a lot higher press, and we were beginning to see a lot of more man-to-man football in the traditional sense. And maybe the timing of this, maybe it was something that could have been encouraged maybe a few years ago, when we were caught in a defensive plan right across the game. But so I'd wait to see how it involved. I'm not a huge fan.
And then the other main one would be the sort of the changing of the black card from being able to bring on a sub to the 10-minute sin bin. Would you be in favour of that one?
Yeah, I am in favour of that. And as much as I think it's going to to bring changes to the game. It's going to bring radical changes to the game. I think even tactically, because you could end up with two men in the bin, at one time, and you could end up in situations where you're 15 on 13 and stuff. Or it will create certainly a lot more space. But I always felt the black card was a little bit too penal in that it was brought in, I suppose, to cut out cynicism in the game. It wasn't worded correctly in that you could still deliberately pull a jersey, and if you didn't pull them to the ground, you didn't get a black card. So the wording was incorrect from the start. You could have an innocuous, clumsy foul that could be interpreted as a cynical foul, and the player's game was ended, and that could be in the first 10 minutes. I didn't kind of like that. I thought, and we saw that over the years, there was a few guys that were very probably hard done by early in games, and I think players needed a little bit of a break. What I didn't like about it was kind of abused, particularly in the latter stages, and teams would tactically use it, that it was okay to get a black card and then replace the man, and in what you call maybe the red zone, because we're now getting 6-7 minutes of injury time in every game, and I think that's something that I'd like to see revisited, because presently it still pays to foul to slow down that clock in the last few minutes of the game, where I think if there was more appropriate punishments, like a 21-yard free straight away for a foul in that period, it would certainly punish teams that are on the defence. So I'm actually for that change. I think it will be good. It's cleaner, and again, it opens up different tactical variations from a manager's perspective in what they need to do when they have that extra man, or they're down, or if they're down two men, or whatever it is, So I think it's an interesting. Will it work at club level? I think it will be chaotic. There's little blips in it that if you come back on the field before the 10 minutes is up, you get a second, and you're off. There's stuff like that still has to be ironed out. And but I'm all for, I think, and I probably changed my opinion on this, in that when you were looking at rule changes traditionally, you had to look at rule changes from the top, and they had to be any rule change you brought in at senior had to go right down through the whole organisation, right down to juvenile. I'm not 100% sure that needs to be the case, and I think you can have tweaks, and you can have differences in the intercounty game and the club game. I'm not in favour of the mark for juvenile football at all to minor, and that sort of. I really don't think there's any need for it within club football, where you want the guys to express themselves, you want them to learn, you want them to develop and stuff like that. So I think we have to be brave enough into the future that when we're looking at tweaks to enhance the various aspects of the game, that we look at it in two different lights. There is the club game and there is the county game, and they are different whether we like it or not. And the control mechanisms, around scores, around referees and linesmen, and all the supports that are there in an intercounty game are not there in a club game. So we have to consider that, I think, as well.
Yeah, and then I suppose the other major thing was, that was going to be brought in this year, was the Tier 2 Championship. Now that doesn't look like it's going to happen this year anyways. Would you have been in favour of that it gives counties an opportunity to win something, or would you like to see it done in a different way?
Yeah, I was in favour of it, and I do get it. I do understand that there's a lot of people that weren't in favour of it, and they see it as being a kind of disrespectful move. But I think we've got to be realistic, and I like the fact that the championship feeds out of your league status, because I think that does give everybody an opportunity to progress, that you're not just based on one game. And if you can progress within the league structure, you can progress. That ultimately leads to you progressing within the championship structure, and it gives teams an opportunity. I've looked at the National League has been a brilliant competition over the last few years, and most weekends I've been at the Division 3 and the Division 4 finals nearly every year for the last few years, and the joy that it actually brings to the teams to achieve something. Even Leitrim playing there, the crowd that Leitrim brought to the National League last year, you get a sense that the guys on these teams want something purposeful to go after, and want something purposeful to achieve, because I think deep down they know they're not in a position to compete with the big boys, and there has to be a journey to get to that position. So I think it's only right that you give, everyone's getting a fair crack at the whip at the start of the championship. You are getting your go at Sam Maguire. And depending on your league structure, then you go into tier 2. But as long as we embrace it, as long as the media embrace it, and the GA embrace it, and it's recognised, and it doesn't get caught in the slipstream and it's ignored, that's when we run into problems. So I do think it's about how the whole association approaches the tier 2 and the profile that it gets. But I think in the longer run, it is better for players in these counties to have something, to have a goal, to have something to go after, because a lot of these counties, they're losing a lot of players and players aren't playing. And I think if you dig deep into the mentality of those players, it's probably because they realise there's not much to be achieved. So I think I'm for it. I've always been for it. And I think, it could be further developed where you could have a kind of a Super 8s in both tiers. And give them more games, because the more games counties get during the summer, the more chance they get to develop and push forward in through the leagues then in January, February.
Yeah, I was even about to say that about the games issue, that even if you lose your first game in tier 2, that you're suddenly out again, like a normal championship. It's nearly like they deserve more games probably in the months of June and July.
Yeah, exactly. And I think, you could replicate something across both tiers, that it's a kind of a group system, like the Super 8s or whatever, or Super 16s on either side, So I think there's scope, as much as Super 8s has had its critics, and it was going into year 3, it was improving. And I know some people aren't a fan of it either. But I think, we've got to be patient. And I think, like, so many people have pushed for a tier 2 and have come up with various championship structures and proposals over the last few years. We have to be able to embrace change, because what was there at the present time is not working. Being beaten in your provincial championships and then hoping to win a couple of games in the qualifiers, and that's the best you can really hope for. That's not going to be a long-term incentive for somebody that wants to play county football for 9-10 years. All you're going to get is lads that will do that for a few years, and then they'll say, do you know what, I'm better off enjoying my summer or traveling or doing whatever I want to do. So I think there has to be a structure that incentivise guys and gives them some sort of goal to go for.
Yeah, on the general All-Ireland championship, obviously Dublin have dominated, they won 5 in a row. Would you say Kerry are the only team probably at this moment in time that could beat them in a semi-final or final?
Well, that's a good question, because I think this year is different in that I think it's a very different dynamic, and Dublin will be always susceptible to a poor performance. So, and that's what makes it interesting, because you take the likes of Mayo. Mayo for me are just so inconsistent at the moment that they could end up on a championship run if they get a couple of wins, depending on the draw. But if they were in the old system, I wouldn't be backing them at all, because they're just not delivering. And I think they've so much mileage in the tank, so much journeys, so much mental scars. I think it's going to be a battle for them. So yeah, Kerry look the obvious contenders in terms of what they brought to last year's All-Ireland final the first day, which they probably left behind them. In terms of the quality of their forward line, I think they still have weaknesses defensively, that they're not fully there yet as a team, in my opinion. Another team that I do have the highest respect for, I think Donegal are definitely, for me, a team on an upward curve as well. I think they have a great balance of players. They have a great balance of scorers. A lot of their age profile is very, very young, and they have a touch of class in the likes of Murphy, McBurdy, the likes of Oisin Lang, a young guy coming through. But they have a lot of good quality players that are going to come into their prime. So for me, they're one team that I would definitely be watching. Tyrone, again, it's very, very difficult. Tyrone have tampered with different game plans over the last couple of years and can't seem to find one that suits them. The days of the defensive structure, and we saw in the league this year, it's the league, they reverted to type in the wind and the rain against Dublin, and it worked on that night. You know what I mean? It was effective on that night. So the defensive type of game works in certain circumstances, but I don't think they've found the right balance that gets the optimum performance out of them. Monaghan, you expected them to decline, a bit of a bounce out of Banty kind of in the league. It's hard to know whether they have the depth. Again, a lot of mileage on the clock. So for me, you're kind of looking Galway or another team, obviously, that have been re-energised under Joyce, have had a lot of talent. A lot of people would say they were kind of locked in a structure for the last couple of years. I think Kevin Walsh got a little bit of unfair criticism, but again, they're a team that have a lot of ability, and they were certainly playing on the front foot in the league, playing attacking football, kicking the ball a lot. But again, the real test is come the summer. So I think you have to reserve judgment on that. So I would say Kerry, and then the ones with potential that I think are coming out of the pack: Galway, Donegal, with maybe you've Mayo then and Tyrone, who are gone a bit flat. Probably that would be my view of the current position, I would thought.
Yeah, do you even think that what makes this Dublin team so good is because even when they look in trouble like that the first day in the All-Ireland final, Johnny Cooper got sent off in the first half and Kerry just seemed to be getting on top in the second half. They didn't panic and they just worked the scores with Dean Rock at the end.
Yeah, that comes with a culture, and it comes with a belief, and it comes with that state of mindset that they're in, which is phenomenal. And I think that's been their biggest strength in winning the 5 in a row. In that, particularly the drawn match this year, Kerry get the goal, they get the momentum at the right period of the game, and Dublin coming into injury time, the composure they showed to work to get back in and get another day was just phenomenal. No sense of panic, and I think that's what they have above other teams at the moment. If you go back over all their successes, they haven't played particularly well in a lot of games. Mayo probably should have put the pin in their collar. In 2016, you had the 2 own goals.
Yeah.
You had the Kerry game. Particularly in Tyrone, All-Ireland in the first half, first 20, 25 minutes, Dublin weren't really firing, and then they just blew them out of the water in the second half. So they've just it's that mental state that they have, and that inner belief of no sense of panic, and that comes with success. That came on the back of 2011, 2013, learning from 14. That's what's put them in the position they are. And I think when other teams get into that position, they have to learn how to win. That's where Kerry probably are not there yet. Mayo, unfortunately, hit with a lot of mental scars for numerous different reasons over the last few years. So, like, you talk about talent and you talk about game plans and you talk about executing game plans, and you can have on paper as good as 15, but it's just a mental state of mind that makes the team so strong, and the culture that they've set and that's been their biggest strength, digging out games or getting a replay or digging out a victory when possibly the tide was going against them.
Yeah, do you even think they get the credit that they probably deserve? They can win 5 All-Irelands. They always get nearly the money thing thrown at them and the population compared to other counties. Do you think they're fully appreciated?
Yeah, no, I think they are. Now, having said that, if you were when a review is done of the top footballers of all time, as we've had in recent weeks and stuff like that, they don't seem to get the credit. But I think that's just because they're a current team. I think they're phenomenal players. Yes, the money factor is, and I think it's only natural. It's like, when a team gets to the top and they have so much success, people will look for holes and they'll look to knock, or they'll find any sort of way to try and knock. And similar to anybody who watched The Last Dance with Michael Jordan, it gets to the top and people are looking to take him down. And I think that's a natural type of mental psychic in society in general, that too much success, people get fed up with it. But I've always made the argument, Dublin, I will not deny that Dublin have advantages. There's no doubt that they have advantages, and I don't think you can deny that. But I do think that what is lost probably on a lot of people is, as much as there's been a lot of investment in coaching in Dublin, and that is probably imbalanced compared to other areas, that this cohort of players came kind of before a lot of that investment and went through various development squads and had various people looking after them. And, Stephen Cluxton was there in my time, Bernard Brogan, Alan Brogan, all there in my time in different different times, and they've been just joined by a special group of players, the Kilkennys, the McCaffreys, the Conor Callans, the Brian Fentons, really good, smart guys, intelligent players. So I think the group themselves as individual players rather than the Dublin brand, they don't get probably as much credit as they deserve as a group of players, rather than focusing in on the brand and the money. And no one denies that, you know, there needs to be a little level out of the playing field in terms of investment and money, but I don't think it links directly to the success that this team has had. That's just my opinion.
Supposed to finish up, how's like the likes of a Kerry and Donegal, Tyrone? What's the secret? Maybe it's just to catch up to Dublin and get on the same sort of level as them.
Well, listen, I think from a Donegal perspective, it's well, one, I suppose it's having variation in your game plan, I suppose, and being able to adapt and having a couple of systems at play. Whether, you know, I think that's one thing Dublin have been very, very good at, that when they came up against defensive systems, they had a plan to break them down. And when they came up against a team that played man-to-man, they were able to optimise what, you know, their strengths in the one-on-one. So I think any team that's looking to develop has to be able to adapt and has to be able to change their game plan and be very, very comfortable with that. But there's a few key contributing factors, like, you know, probably why are Donegal such contenders? Well, Sean Patton again is a huge factor, that having a goalkeeper that can deliver variation and kickouts, and because we're seeing a lot more high presses, we're seeing midfield come back into it. You know, the kick out and retaining possession from the kick out is usually important. So it's having a mix of that balance, as I said, variation in plays, star quality, and having the forwards, you know, that can get the shot to score ratio to the highest level. I think that's really what teams need to achieve to kind of catch up with them. And for me, Donegal, Kerry, possibly Galway, you know, look best placed to do that in the coming months. They all have a touch of X factor about them, in that, you know, you look at Shane Walsh for Galway, you know, Michael Murphy for Donegal, David Clifford for Kerry. They all have a couple of players that are just light up the place and can bring everybody along with them. So yeah, there's a combination of things really.
Well, hopefully we'll see some sort of action this year. It's looking good anyways. But thanks, Ciaran, for coming on.
Yeah, no problem, Dara. Pleasure. Anytime. No problem. Best of luck.